But now I'm worried about my garage being cluttered because I'm like, okay, so am I cluttered because I have emotional trauma, or am I cluttered because I want to kill my cat? Like, you know what I mean? Like now now I'm concerned. Now I'm scared.
Probably not because you want to kill your cat. It's probably because you have emotional trauma. It's, I mean, being a sociopath is just a different level of mental illness, right? And mental health. We all have mental illness of some sort at one degree or another. We all have trauma, right?
Mm-hmm.
I will talk about big trauma and big T trauma and little T trauma. I talk about that quite a bit, right? Big T traumas are like being molested and abused and, but there's little T traumas too, like having your parent forget to pick you up from school or be 10 minutes late picking you up from school. That's a trauma that will have an impact.
Hello, friend. You're listening to the Edited for Content Show, a place where we try to understand a topic by extracting truth from theater. If you like this podcast, let me know, share it, and come back again.
Webster defines Feng Shui as a Chinese geometric practice in which a structure or site is chosen or configured as so it harmonizes with the spiritual forces that inhabit it. The reconfiguration required in Feng Shui can come in many different forms. For some, it is as simple as moving a chair or changing the color of a wall. One's life can be reconfigured as well. This usually comes in the form of trauma. When I saw my guest's story, I wanted to know more about her process for performing life Feng Shui. I wanted to understand how she took the destruction of her own life and turned it into a harmonization with the spiritual forces around her. My guest took years of trauma and abuse and turned it into a revolutionary mind-body program to help those Feng Shui more than just a living space. I want to welcome my guest, Krystal Holm. Krystal, thank you for coming on my show.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
Oh, it's great to have you. Are you kidding me? So first and foremost, are you still living in Minnesota, or are you from Minnesota?
I'm originally from there. I haven't lived in Minnesota since 1998. I spent a couple of months there this past winter with my grandmother during COVID. I spent a couple of months with her, but nope, I haven't lived in Minnesota for a long time.
I have family in Minnesota. That's why I'm like, I always think it's interesting when people are from, like, born in Minnesota. No matter where they move, they'll always be like, no, I'm from Minnesota. Like, you could live somewhere else for like 30, 40 years. It's like, no, I'm from Minnesota. I'm staying here, but I'm actually from Minnesota. And I think that's a very Midwest thing.
I think so. I usually only tell people that I'm from Colorado because I've lived in Colorado for such a long time. So I almost never say that I'm originally from Minnesota. So that's so funny.
You've given up? I can't believe it. Did you lose the accent is the question.
Yeah, I don't really have one. I don't think I have a couple words maybe that'll come out and you might hear it in an O here and there. But for the most part, yeah, I don't really have much of an accent.
Do you use the word? Do you use the term smidgen?
I don't think so.
Yeah. That's my favorite, and that was growing up when, like, relatives were cooking. That was a measurement. Mm-hmm. I couldn't tell you what it is, but that's an actual measurement, and there's actually recipes I have that written in.
Mm-hmm. I've seen them. I couldn't tell you how much it is either, but I do know how much to put in when it calls for a smidgen.
Yeah, you're ahead of me. Yeah, I thought that was such an interesting, very Minnesota thing, So growing up there, what was that? Kind of how long did you live there, and growing up there, what was that like?
Cold. I lived there until, I lived there until I was a teenager and I moved to Colorado, and then I moved back and graduated from high school and was there until my 20s and moved away. But I kind of had a pretty miserable childhood, and I think everything about Minnesota is related to that for me. I grew up in a very abusive household. When I was 8, my parents got a divorce. And shortly thereafter, my dad moved to Colorado. And both of my parents remarried. My mother remarried a pedophile and a child abuser. And I actually told her before they got married. And I gave her an ultimatum that it was me or him. And she chose him.
How old were you?
I was 9.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And so I kind of decided then and there that I would never be like her. And I started looking for other role models then for how to be a woman, how to be a mom, how to be everything, right? That wasn't like that. And so then my dad remarried, and so I would get to go to Colorado every summer and spend the summer with my dad and my stepmom. And my stepmom became my idol, really. She was the one who introduced me to energy work, magic. She had grown up in her life. She had spent a lot of time with a gypsy family as she was growing up. She had married into a gypsy family and learned all of this energy work from there. And so she had taught me all of these things about magic and divination and all of these metaphysical things that I was infatuated with. And at the time, I was living in this abusive situation. And at 9, 10, 11 years old, magic seemed like a great solution. Seemed like the only solution, to be honest.
Right.
Like nothing was going to fix it unless a miracle occurred.
Mm-hmm.
Or until I turned 18, right? Even when I was supposed to move there, I think the court says 11 or 12 that you can decide which parent. And shortly before that happened, I had written a book about it was about being molested. Really, it was an expression of this sexual thing, right? It was about a cheerleader being gangbanged by the whole football team. And so my mother found it and shared it with my aunt. And the two of them decided that it must be my father who is molesting me. And so they wouldn't let me go there. And so I couldn't actually move there until I turned 14. And then I was able to escape for a few years and live with my dad until, my mom made me move back in. But I had such an infatuation already for this idea of being able to manifest the life that I want magically. And so that was something I always studied, even into adulthood. And that sort of when I got to college, which I went back to college in my 30s, right? I was told a lot that I was too stupid for college. I was too dumb to be really anything more than a wife and mother. And so I better quick snag me a man and have some kids. And so I had 2 kids by the time I was 19. And, I spent my 20s kind of being a mom. And then in my 30s, I went back to school. And so I was studying interior design in school. And my psychology teacher wanted us to write a paper about interior design. Oh, and psychology. Like the two had to be related. It had to be with our field of study, right? There was other studies there too, right? Culinary students, graphic. So everybody had to pick something in their field of study and write a psychology paper on it. So that was sort of my approach to Feng Shui. That was when I first was introduced to Feng Shui. Was in college in my psychology paper. And, it had only been westernized not too long before, like 5 or 6 years before it had become into popularity in the United States. And so I didn't know a lot about it, but I knew it was sort of related to energy. And so I took off and studied it for my class to write a paper. And yeah, I found that was way beyond too confusing to think I understood it at first. So I actually let it go when I first started doing Feng Shui. I mean, it was a thing that I was interested in, but I didn't feel like I had a grasp on it right away. And so I finished my design degree and started my career as a designer.
Okay.
And then it was as a few years into my career as a designer, and I was living in Hawaii. And my boss came to me with, they had submitted the design back to a client and the Feng Shui was wrong. And so the Feng Shui was bad. And so she was like, does anybody know anything about Feng Shui? Can anybody help? And so I kind of volunteered myself to fix it. And I took what little bit of knowledge I'd gained from my 1 quarter study of, all the books in college. And I was like, let me see if I can do this. And that I really, really, what got in over my head, I felt like a full imposter when I was doing it. So then I went back to study Feng Shui at the American Feng Shui Institute. And
the project must have come out all right, though. I mean,
I got an A on it, but it's funny because, like I said, it had only been popular for about 6 years in the United States at that time. And so all these people, all these experts were writing books, but, none of them really knew what they were talking about. And so there was all this misinformation. Like I'd read one book that would say one thing and another book that would say the exact opposite. And I was like, why is this so confusing? But I was such a type A perfectionist because of the way I'd grown up with, you don't ever make mistakes. You don't ever make mistakes in the house I grew up in. Like that's punishable severely. So I was going to get an A on that paper. So I checked out like a 2-foot tall stack of books and took them home. It was 11 weeks, I thought I was going to learn everything there is to know about Feng Shui in that 11 weeks. And,
it's an 11-week course. I will know it all.
Self-study program.
Right.
So I can write a good paper. But I think I've always kind of been, it was sort of a natural thing since I've been studying humans since I was little as a, how do I become who I want to be? Like, how do I become the someone that I can admire and respect and be proud to be? And just trying to find how to be that, try to find a role model. So it was sort of almost like psychology was a study for fun, but never never like a career thing. It was more like just the study of people.
Right.
That it was always my thing sort of growing up, I guess.
So you talked about your stepmother and this magical energy. So then what is Feng Shui and how does that tie into energy? Like what is Feng Shui?
Well, Feng Shui is really just a study, right? It's a sort of a science of that you study the flow of energy in space, right? That you study your relationship with your environment. We all have an energetic frequency, and so do the spaces that we live in. And sometimes those energetic frequencies are in alignment, and sometimes they clash. And so Feng Shui is really just studying how the energy flows in your space and what your relationship with that space is. How are you cluttering it up? Because it is it's sort of an extension of our energetic field, right? It's the box that we live in, and it's the container that holds all of our stuff. So it reflects us, right?
Okay.
It reflects. That's kind of why we decorate, right? We want it to reflect all these things, but it also will reflect all of what's going on internally for us, as well as what's going on externally for us, like say in our career or our relationships or our finances or our health, but also our mental health and our limiting beliefs. And so Feng Shui is all of that tied into one big package.
Wow. Okay. So yeah, no, you're right. And I think that I think that in my life, I mean, obviously I don't have any 11 weeks of formal training, but um, in my life, I think that I've always had problems with, because I'm a guy and like furniture. I'm going to use the living room, right? I can literally get it through my entire life with one recliner in the center of the room. Um, and then I got married, and no. So, like, we have like a picture wall, and we have these different pieces of furniture, and we have pillows that are not designed to lay on. They're just a pillow that's supposed to mean something in a corner of a couch or a love seat or whatever the case may be. And I think that it does feel different.
Mhm.
And I think that's kind of the trap y'all have, because the sooner that you can get in there and redecorate and make it a more livable space, or a space with better energy, that's the trap, because then we feel like it's home, because it's this whole like home like
Mhm.
feel thing. And then we're like, okay, having it around isn't so bad. But there is something to that. I think there is something to having the right thing in a space. I don't possess that gift, and I'll suffer through it because I won't pay attention. But there's a huge difference when something just fits the way it's
Mhm.
supposed to,
Yes.
and that's amazing.
Yes. Yes.
It really is. It's you know amazing to me that that's a thing in the universe. When you first went out on your own, like, what was your design, or kind of what was your goals, or before you did feng shui, were you designing things, or were you just like, how did that come about, this passion for design, I guess?
Well, I've always sort of had that, right? I mean, even when I was little, my favorite toy was my Barbie dream house, right? I would just spend hours rearranging the furniture in the Barbie dream house. But also, one of the few freedoms that I had when I was younger was the freedom to sort of decorate my space and rearrange my furniture. Um, and so it's sort of always been a thing. I was always rearranging my furniture. As a teenager, I was always the friend that would get the phone call like, let's rearrange, or let's paint my room, or let's do that was sort of always part of my thing. So when I decided to go back to college, becoming a designer was a very natural choice. Strangely, I had a debate between becoming an interior designer or becoming a forensic psychologist that specialized in serial killers. Those were the two career paths that I was going to take. Like, yeah, very closely related. And strangely enough, they both show up in the work that I do. Not that I work with serial killers, but the psychology of clutter is a lot of the work that I do with my clients. Um,
Oh.
and so it wasn't that far off. But I've always had a very, I grew up with a sociopath. And so, like I grew up with people that are very similar to the psychopathy of serial killers. So it's not that strange that I would have this fascination as an adult. But I still had this love of interior design. And so when I went into it, that 11-week class, that psychology class, really sparked an interest that sent me back to school again,
Mhm.
later to really dive into it. And when that wasn't enough, like I dove in deeper into the clutter part of it and the psychology part of it on my own to really, because after that one client that wanted her feng shui fixed, and I um, started studying it in depth, I started taking on my own clients and working with them to be able to do the feng shui of their house to get a specific result. I had started, sort of on this other parallel journey of healing all the trauma that I had grown up with. And so one of the things I had always wanted was my own business. And so I started a couple of them. On the second business opportunity that I
Mhm.
had, the man that ran that company was very into personal development. He felt like it was the key component to building a business. And so he incorporated that sort of training into his business model. And so as I had sort of been introduced to it, and I'd been following it. And at the same time that I started studying Feng Shui in depth, I also started doing more of a personal development journey, going to seminars and different experiences to heal all of that trauma. And all of that combined together to sort of guide me down this very specific path towards where I ended up. And then along the way, I hurt myself on my job, and I couldn't walk anymore. And so I started my own company,
Mm-hmm.
and I wasn't doing. I didn't really know what I was doing. I'd tried a few companies, and at least I knew to hire a coach this time.
Mm-hmm.
Like I couldn't work. I was on bed rest, so I sort of had. I wasn't trying to do it as a side hustle.
Right.
Like when I started studying Feng Shui in college, and I started taking on clients, I worked with all of these women, and I would, hear all this feedback from them, but I was still trying to work my job and have, do all of the things. So I couldn't really do just the one thing. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so when I got hurt and I was stuck on bed rest, I couldn't do anything but sit at home all day and go to doctor's appointments when I got to go. And so it seemed like the perfect time to really start my business. Like, why not? I'm stuck at home. I don't have anything else to do. I'm sure a lot of people felt that way this past year when, being stuck at home. I know a lot of businesses got started this past year, right? It's its own sort of thing. And my coach hired me to design her space. And I was reminded of something I had learned earlier when I worked in high-end residential design. I worked with a lot of entrepreneurs then, very successful people.
Mm-hmm.
And they all did more with self-care. And so I started actually creating my space around self-care instead of around business. And it worked. Like I used Feng Shui to get myself into alignment with my space for a specific vision.
Oh.
Right? To bring my vision to life. Like it was like I turned my whole space into this 3D vision board that I got to live in, not just hang on my wall and look at.
Oh, okay.
Of, like I want to, like for me, it was a yoga practice. I'd always wanted to have a yoga practice, and I never really did it.
Mm-hmm.
But then when I hurt myself and I couldn't get any help from the insurance people or the medical people, because of this whole big battle that I went through with workman's comp, I sort of had to do it myself, which wasn't new to me, right?
Mm-hmm.
I felt like it's always been I got to do this myself thing since childhood, right? Like I have to save myself.
Right.
And so I felt like I have to save myself. I'm battling the biggest monster of my life, which is workman's comp insurance, and not being able to get help from anyone who tried to help me. Every doctor who tried to help me would get shut out. And so I took it on myself and created this space of, I'm going to align my space with my very specific vision to heal my body. And I applied everything I knew, like everything I'd been telling my clients to do, and they don't always do. You know what I mean? Like you want your clients to do the work, and you tell them to do the work, and they don't always do the work. But then, like you got to lead by example too. Like, so it was more like walking my talk and living, actually applying it and living it myself so I could come out the other side. And that's what I did. And I ended up getting myself out of a wheelchair and getting all of this clarity around how I could help other women like myself to really create a life that they are envisioning
Mm-hmm.
and don't know how to bring it to life, right? How do you make it into reality? How do you live in a 3D vision board is sort of what happened. Like, how do you turn your whole life into not just being in your head, but into reality? And I sort of realized that's what I was doing. And I didn't, like, it was just, it was my life work. Like, it was sort of, you know what I mean? Like, even as a child, I want to magically figure out how to create the life that I want. That's just been this picture in my head. And then one day I realized, well, I did it. Now, how did I do it?
Right.
And let me show other people how I did it, because it worked.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, but yeah, it was quite a journey to get there.
Well, and you know, now you can look back and see how these traumatic events and your perseverance to get through them was at many levels throughout your life to get you here. But now it gives you such this, I mean, you're a trauma survivor, not only mentally, but physically, because of your, you had an injury at work that where basically you couldn't walk. You had these emotional traumas throughout your childhood and early adulthood, if you will, kind of through that. And I'm of the mindset, and I actually told somebody else this on another podcast, because we were talking about psychology, and he brought up a great point. So my thing is, would you rather take advice about stopping drinking from somebody who's never touched a drop, or from a former alcoholic who's now recovered? And I've been there, brother. Like, I've been in that hole. His example was Catholicism, which this one blew my mind, because you get marriage counseling from a priest, the most
Who's
celibate.
never been married and is not even allowed to be married. Right. I have another one for you, because this is my experience. When I started my own healing journey,
Mhm.
the one route that I wouldn't go was therapy and psychiatry, because I had an experience as a child when I told what was happening, when I told about the physical abuse and the mental abuse and the sexual abuse and the religious abuse. When I told, my parents took me to a psychiatrist and told them that I'm a liar and I needed to be fixed. And I know this person could not have had any experience with child abuse personally. And it was only one of those type of, and you see them a lot in different medical fields. I've seen it a lot with different doctors, this God complex idea of, I have no experience, but I know more than you, so I can fix you. My parents are that way, and this psychiatrist was that way as well. He believed them. Like, the problem was me, that I was a liar, not that I should be believed about being abused. So he had a doctorate, he had a paper education, no real experience.
And telling you how you felt.
Right. He told me that I was like a wild horse that had been captured and trapped into this corral, and I was standing at the edge, starving to death, staring off at the mountains, wanting my freedom. And if I would just settle down to be broke to saddle, I'd learn how happy horses really are to be owned.
Get out.
No, that's really what he told me. That was really what this guy told me when I was 9 years old. And I told him I was being abused. That was his response, was that, no, you're just not happy with this new stepdad. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not. And this is why. But, that was a whole trauma around that thing. So I felt like I really had to do it, like, on my own. There was no one was going to listen. No one was going to hear me. No one was going to help me. I was on my own always. At least that's how it felt.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of examples, like those who don't know teach.
Well, and surprisingly how true that really is.
You're listening to Edited for Content, separating truth from theater.
Hey, I'm your host, Wes.
And I'm your host, Scott.
And on our show, Hanging at the Barbershop, we use what we like to call the Jerry Seinfeld format. That is, we're a show about absolutely nothing, which really means we talk about everything and anything. Our wives told us we had a face for radio, but none of them would hire us, so we're going it alone. From beer reviews to weird news, road rage to nerd rage, we talk about it all. If nothing else, we think we're entertaining and we hope you do too. And hey, if you learned something along the way, then we've done a job we never set out to do. Hanging at the Barbershop is available on all major podcasting platforms, and please like us on Facebook and follow us on Instagram and Twitter. Hanging at the Barbershop is a Sawcast production.
Your situation, trying to compare you to a wild horse, that's just, you need that to submit. I think there's a whole culture out there right now about women not having to submit. I think I heard something about a movement of some kind. I don't know. Maybe I wasn't paying attention, but
right.
Yeah, I think there was a whole
little
thing.
one, feminism. It's a little tiny thing that started.
I think there was this person, this Ruth Bader Ginsburg. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, it's, it kills me because it's like, and I think for your situation, especially during that time frame of when you would have been, 9, 10, society was society. You talked about, you get a man, you get some babies, and that's all you need. But that was truly, that was the mindset for years.
But that was 1980. That was not that long ago. That was 1980.
But it was still, yeah. But it was still the mindset.
Right. The mindset of, yeah. Well, no, absolutely. I mean, and we could go down this whole, I'm sure you and I could do the whole couple hours on feminism and talking about how bad that went. And I think it's, interesting because for a professional, for a child to go to a professional on this, and I think you're 100% right. He obviously didn't have a lot of experience other than paper, because now if you had a child go to a professional and say the things that you said, I think that the reaction is so much different. Like the child's removed from the situation. It's not? No, it's not.
Oh,
it's not.
Really?
The liars are still believed. My sister's children are being molested right now, and I reported it not that long ago. And my mother lied, and my sister lied, and they're all lying, and they're being believed. They're covering up for it. They're repeating the same pattern.
Wow.
That's the exact same pattern that is being repeated. And there will still be professionals that will believe. There will still be people that don't believe, or there still will be people that make the child shut up. It still happens all the time.
Oh, that floors me. I wouldn't even have believed that. Oh my goodness. Wow. See, now that's
I mean, look at what's going on in the world today. Look at all the sex trafficking and all the pedophile rings and all of it's still there. People are still, it's still happening. Children are still being victimized. Children are still being abused. People are still covering it up. And the professionals are still not listening.
See, that blows me away. That absolutely floors me. And especially in the cell phone days of technology and pictures. And I mean, because I think back to the 80s, and I have to be dead honest with you, I'm really glad my cell phone didn't have a camera on it. I'm just saying. I'm just saying. So it's hard. Wow, that's hard. I guess I just didn't know. But I mean, it's not a world that I've ever really truly been super exposed to. So, wow.
This is how generational trauma happens, right?
Mm-hmm.
The things we learn in our childhood, the things that we are taught. And I'm not talking about your ABCs and your 1, 2, 3s. I'm talking about what is modeled for you by the adults in your life.
Okay.
I wasn't the only child in my family. I was not the only one who grew up in that. My story is completely different from everybody else's story in my family. They all went through the same stuff I did, but they all have different stories and different outcomes. We all were modeled something, but the stories we tell ourselves about it is different. And what we learn from it is different, right?
Mhm.
So we all become this version of ourselves that we learned how to be from childhood,
Okay.
right? Mine was a conscious choice. I will never be like you. I told that to my mother's face when I was 8 years old. I will never be like you. And I was mad,
Mm-hmm.
right? How dare you choose him over me? I was mad about it. And I was adamant that I would never, ever be. But that's very opposite from most little girls.
Mm-hmm.
Most little girls want to grow up and be just like their mom, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? I wanted to be just like my stepmom because that
Mhm.
was my next idol. Like I wanted to be just like her, but I spent 80% of my time, right? I got 2 months out of the year with my dad and my stepmom. The other 10 months out of the year were with my mother and my stepdad. And I learned how to become a version of myself that I hated when I became an adult. It's why I went back to school. It's why I went on my healing journey. It's why I decided to really take this challenge on and become something else because I hated everything about me and everything about my life.
When you say you hated it, what do you mean? Like, what did you hate about your life in that early stage?
Well, I didn't have any of the dreams that I wanted,
Mm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, even after school, and I became an interior designer, which I loved.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I got my first job out of school, and then the recession hit.
Mm.
And then I moved and I got my next dream job. And the recession hit there later,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because it kind of came in a wave,
Right.
you know what I mean? And then I start my business and, you know, like it sort of was one failure after another. There was never successes. My relationships were abusive and unhealthy,
Mm.
and I wasn't happy. I was always looking for what's next. What is going to fix this? Like, when am I going to be happy with my life? When am I going to have anything that I want? Yeah, I got a man, but I can't stand him. I mean, now my life is different, but back then I
Right,
was
right.
like, you know, I was in a relationship literally just for the sake of being in one. I couldn't stand my partner.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't like my job. There was no part of my life that my children made me happy, but at the same time, I was mostly a single parent, and it was a lot of work. I had a lot of resentments around, not to my children, but, you know, like just resentments of how hard it was and
Mm-hmm.
how it wasn't what I envisioned.
Right.
And then when I really started looking at, well, the problem has to be me, right? It's my life. I have to be, I've tried to fix all the things, right?
Mm-hmm.
I got a better job. I got a better man. I got a better, you know, like
Mm-hmm.
still not happy, still, you know, still a problem, still not right. I still don't admire me. I'm still not proud of me. I still don't like me. And so that was the catalyst really that sent me on that deeper journey of, well, I got to fix me.
Mm-hmm.
It sort of is that expression, you know, where you talk about, like, if you have all these relationships and they all fail, you sort of got to look at the common denominator is you. Like, at some point you realize I'm the common denominator in all of the shit show. Like, it's my shit show and I am the star. Like, okay, like I gotta clean it up, right? Like
Right.
I gotta fix it. And so, yeah, I went on that journey because even though I didn't want to become anything like her, there was still all of these beliefs
Mm-hmm.
that I grew up with that were in there, you know, beliefs around what I could do or what I was worth or what I deserved and what I could have and what I couldn't, and money and just all of those things in there that we learn as children, not from being taught, but from being modeled.
Mm-hmm.
And so I became a little bit of both of them and had to fix the parts that were broken and traumatized and put all those pieces back together to create a new version. And that is the version that gets to live the life that I was envisioning. Like in the process, all of a sudden it was like, oh, here it is. Here's what I wanted always. And I just sort of woke up one day and realized it had happened. Like,
Well, that's the thing. It didn't just happen. You clawed your way.
I did the work.
Yeah, you did the work, and that's how you got there. So, which brings me to your company, A Designed Life.
Design Life Studio.
Design Life Studio. And, you know, of course, I want to know kind of what you do for individuals with that. But more importantly, did the basis of that come from you not having that person or that support structure to kind of help you get to where you needed to be? Because I mean, a lot of your life was it was a solo mission, and it was a solo, kind of solo in all regards, because you were solo in identifying the problems in your life, you were solo for fixing them. So is that kind of what this is? Like, what is your company, and who have you helped, and where are we going?
Well, it's we all have to do the work for ourselves
Mm-hmm.
is the one thing that I've learned. But I didn't do it alone. I did it with a lot of leadership, a lot of guidance, and a lot of mentorship. There was a lot of people out there that when I found them and I searched for them,
Mm-hmm.
they were willing to teach me what I needed to learn to evolve into this version of me. And that's really what my company does. And that's sort of how I created my method. My method is the Designed Life method, and it is designing for who you are becoming. So we really look into that. My method is it's a 4-step method, mind, body, soul, home. So we talk about the mindset piece, right? We talk about the clutter and what that is. We declutter it. We declutter the mindset. I teach you my method, my 5-step method to declutter. And so that you can go into to your healing journey. We talk about the self-care piece, right? And making room for who you are becoming. We talk about making room in your space for who that woman is, that woman that you're envisioning. And we design for her, not for who you are up till now. I think when I was working as a designer in a traditional design firm, what I noticed in that industry is it was all about the designer. It's a look at me, I'm famous. Don't you want your house decorated by me? Don't you want your house designed by me? Because I'm the best. And it was not about the client. It was about the client saying, oh yes, so-and-so designed my space.
Oh.
And I've always saw what they were designing was for the person they are right now. It's the person that has accomplished all of these things in the past and has become here. I don't want to design for her. I want to design for the woman in the future who is who I'm becoming, because that is how you turn your space into a 3D vision board to become that person. And so that is how I work with clients. We design their entire space to really operate as a 3D vision board. In life, we align them, the feng shui of their space, we align them with their space, their goal, their vision, and their energy, and design it all right into the space so that they become her. It's sort of designed for who you're becoming. And it's how it works. It's how the whole system works. And so that's how my company helps to basically teach you how to use feng shui to create peace and prosperity in your life, because feng shui is just a tool. And so, yeah, that's how we help.
So I think it's fascinating because earlier you talked about psychology and like sociopaths with a cluttered mind.
Mhm.
And so in many ways, is it kind of a safe assumption then that if people have difficulty in their space and in their now, it truly is a mental clutter of things that are blocking them, as opposed to maybe it's so much, we put a lot on the physical things, but it might actually be more of a mental clutter
100%.
that needs to be
100%.
fixed.
Yes. Yes. It's why the clutter journey is so important. Because if you don't dive into the clutter and really look at it, and you're just going to repeat it, right?
Mhm.
If we go after just get rid of it and don't look at it, you're just going to repeat the same process. This is how people wind up like hoarders, right?
Mhm.
It's sort of the same thing. You go in and just mass declutter stuff without addressing the actual issue. You're just going to gain it all back and then some. Just like you lose 10 pounds and then you gain back and you gain an extra 10 just to be on the safe side. Clutter is the same because
Mhm.
you've never addressed the mental and emotional clutter that is also attached to the physical clutter. The physical clutter is just an expression of the mental and emotional.
Oh, okay. So it's just it's like the physical manifestation of the mental issues.
Yep, that's exactly what it is. It's exactly what clutter is. But it's also why if we just go in and say, throw it all away, it's not going to work, because you're just going to gain back 10 extra pounds, right? Because you've never actually addressed it. It's part of why it's so traumatic.
Mhm.
On that show, on the show Hoarders, when
Mhm.
they declutter, they don't dive into it in this way and address it. They are just, we have to get rid of it, it'll make you better. But they don't do the psychology part, and it's so traumatizing for them. It's why it's good TV,
Because of the
because we get
trauma.
to watch them freak out and have mental breakdowns. And yeah, it's because no one is actually addressing the mental and emotional trauma that the clutter is reflecting, that the clutter is a representation of. It's just a physical manifestation of what's really going on.
Okay, so now I
And
feel like a total schmuck for watching that show, because enjoying them like taking garbage and dead cats that have been buried under garbage for years and stuff out of the room, watching that, not realizing that it's not just as simple as collecting junk, that there is an emotional component that they're not addressing. But for television, I'm going to go in and rip your shit out.
it's I mean, and they bring on experts, but it's not, these are, yeah, they do what design, I mean, that's why we have to do it in this time frame.
Mm-hmm.
Most of those have had years to get to where they are, and it's never been addressed until, oh, now you have a week to move out because your house is being condemned, and so now we're going to throw you on TV and shame you. and re-traumatize you for the trauma you already have. That show is incredibly traumatizing to the victims that are on it.
Oh, I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, they're being re-traumatized. They're being shamed nationally for their trauma. It's a horrifying show. It's a horrifying show. I'm actually quite glad that they took it off the air. And I understand that it makes for good TV, but look at the reflection of society from what we watch now.
Mm-hmm.
We get enjoyment out of that. We get enjoyment out of other people's misery. We get enjoyment out of watching things. That's why we live in the society that we live in now. I think that's my belief. It's why we have so much trouble with police brutality, and why we have to have these movements like Me Too and Black Lives Matter.
Mm-hmm.
And we should know that. We should know that rape is not okay, and murdering Black people is not okay, and attacking Asian people is not okay. But we watch this stuff on TV, and it's entertainment for us to watch people be traumatized and victimized.
No.
And it becomes a normal part of our life. And so we don't think anything of it when a cop kneels on a man until he dies.
Yep, absolutely.
And now we have to make laws about this because we as humans don't understand that it's wrong. Like,
that blows my mind. I will never understand why I have to have a law to tell me I can't kill somebody. Like, that is the dumbest thing to me, because it's
right.
Like, and you're absolutely right, is in the sense that, and this is why I have trouble. This is why I started this podcast, to be quite honest with you, because I feel that the days of Walter Cronkite and the days of getting a news that is strictly unbiased, to that this is what happened, not picking a side, not presenting a side, not showing one angle of a video that doesn't show, and a snippet that doesn't show the whole thing.
Well,
yeah.
And that hasn't been true since the 80s, when, wasn't it Reagan that changed the law to say it's okay for them to lie on the news?
Yeah.
And now look at us.
Well, absolutely. And it's amazing how many people
needed to be illegal. It needed to be illegal to lie on the news.
When you started creating, and see, I'm very much in the thought that we're creating this utopian society where popular opinion is actually going to take over in terms of making decisions for the society. And my example is that if the ratings for these, like CNN, Fox, these news channels weren't so high with the garbage they put on there, they wouldn't keep doing it. But it's what they want to see. It's like Facebook. When Facebook stories and news stories are on Facebook, and then they're coming out now and saying, well, some of them weren't true, it didn't stop how many hundreds of thousands or millions of people sharing it and saying, hey, can you believe this is happening? Do you ever watch there's a television show called The Orville? I don't know if you've ever seen it. So it's a Seth MacFarlane, and basically he's doing kind of a comedy version of Star Trek is what it is. It's really great, and I love it. But they actually have an episode where you wear these little badges, and there's a little green up arrow and a little red down arrow. And if you say hi to somebody and they're like, oh, thank you, they'll push it at your little green up arrow that you did a positive thing. Well, if you get too many downs, then you go in front of a tribunal, and if society decides that you're a horrible human person, they're going to kill you. So, yeah.
It's like The Good Place.
Yes.
Where nobody could ever get enough points, because now we're so in the negative. Like sending the flowers to your mom, you get negative points now because of all of the emissions for the truck and all of the, the slave labor to cut the flowers and grow the flowers and all of and so nobody ever can get into the good place anymore because of the negative, like everything's on a cell phone and all of the negative points that you are ahead. It's very similar. Yeah. That's where we live.
It's where we live. So when you're with a client, have you ever had a situation where during the initial decluttering of their mind and their kind of their traumatic history, where they have kind of an aha moment that causes them to really kind of emotionally let loose as you're going through that process?
A lot of times. Yes. It's ideal.
Mm-hmm.
It's sort of the goal. We want to, I mean, not so much, yeah, it's part of the process, right? Those are usually the ones that are the problem, right? There's a lot of the clutter that is able to be decluttered, but
Mm-hmm.
there's always the pieces that are stuck, and that's usually the deeper trauma reflections. It's the deeper, and so they'll have their breakthroughs. Sometimes they have them with me. Sometimes it'll just be something I say that they'll go off and then do the work, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because they're doing the work solo too, right?
Right.
I teach them the method and then they go off and do the work. And like I do the design work part, but they're doing the decluttering. We're doing the sort of like you and I, we're talking about it and we're processing the stuff. And yeah, that's then they'll have their breakthrough and come and let me know. But always, everyone has a breakthrough of some sort.
And I think it's, go ahead.
If they don't, we're not done working together.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So, and I think that's one thing you keep bringing up, which I think is amazing, is I'm going to give you the toolbox, but you're going to build it.
Mm-hmm. I don't want them to be dependent on me.
Mm-hmm.
We need grown, independent, self-sufficient adults.
Mm-hmm.
Most of us are still acting out of our child trauma. And so we're like, they don't need me to help them all. Like I can't do the work for them. So yeah, my goal is to give them the tools so that they are able to, because we all have different layers too, right? Where I am on my healing journey is way different than like where you are or where the next person is. And so we can't be in that place together. I didn't live your experience. I can't go there with you. I can give you a map
Mm-hmm.
and show you how to get there. But it's a journey that you have to take on your own. Like birth and death, healing is a journey that you can only do on your own.
Oh, that's great. I like that. That's very true. Have you had any clients that they just couldn't get with the program? Like they just couldn't, for whatever reason it may be it they weren't ready, they weren't, they just kept going back to the same pattern, whatever the case may be. Has there ever been a situation with a client where you're like, I don't know what to say, you know what I mean?
All of them.
Yeah, she goes, they're all difficult.
No, not that they're all difficult,
mm-hmm.
but that's why they all come.
Right.
Because I talk about this a lot. Fake it till you make it versus face it till you make it. What they are facing is hard stuff.
Mm-hmm.
They are big things. Sometimes they're looking at stuff like my own, right? Trauma. Sometimes they're looking at what are they having to declutter? What do they have to let go of, right? It's hard work. And so sometimes they need to go away and come back. Sometimes they need to have space. We need to make room for our healing journey. And that's a big part of what I do. That's all of what I do. We make room for that. But sometimes that means energetic space as much as physical space and emotional and mental space. So yeah, I find it's quite true for them to, when it gets to the hard part, it's quite common that's where they will ghost and disappear for a bit and then come back in. And it's a normal part of the process. At first, it used to really upset me. I felt like I did something wrong, like it was my fault. And I had to work through some of that. That was some of my own trauma. Like, what was I doing wrong? How is this and then I realized the pattern. And it's just, that's the pattern. I did it too. It's part of the, you go in and you come back up. It's like swimming, right? Like whales, they go down and they come up for air, and then they go down again, and they come up for air and they go down again. It's the same. Healing is that sort of a process.
I have to tell you, I'm really glad you went with whales, because I swear if you were going to do Dory and start going, just keep swimming, just keep swimming, I was like, now I got to stop you, because now I'm no, don't do that. But you're,
no, they
but
have to
right.
breathe.
Yeah.
They have to come back for the breath.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I feel like, and that's when they come back, like, okay, I'm drowning in it again. Like, give me a different perspective, give me a fresh eye, give me a different way to see this. And then I can breathe again.
Right. Yeah, no, absolutely. So you've had great successes, obviously, which great for you. I think it's amazing that, like I said, that you went from where you're at to what you're now doing, and the help that you're providing. So I've got to ask, what's the next evolution? Where we go from here?
For me, I think the next evolution, I love the work that I do. I love working with clients. I definitely want to do that on a bigger scale. The next evolution for me is, I'm working on a keynote speech. I'll be speaking on stage, and probably writing a book is the next big thing. So.
Oh, wow. So are you talking like TED Talk?
Yeah.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
I love TED Talks.
Yep, that's the goal. So I'm secretly working on a keynote speech right now. So
nobody
don't tell anybody.
Don't tell anybody. Nobody say nothing to. So when you share this podcast, please don't tell anybody that Krystal Holm is working on a top secret keynote speech. Okay, so that's hush hush.
Yes,
that's
exactly.
Awesome. Well, no, and that's great. And I think that your message, and I think what you're doing, is something that needs to get out there and to help a lot of people that probably don't, one, know that they need the help, and two, don't truly understand. It's kind of like, when we were talking, the one thing I keep thinking about when I was younger was every time I had a bad breakup, I would either shave my head or dye my hair.
Mm.
As a change, if you will.
Mm-hmm. I sell my bedroom pet.
I sell my bedroom. Actually, that's kind of smart for a lot of reasons, but we won't go down that road right now. That's a different day. But that, exactly, it's like you have this massive change, not realizing that that there was more decluttering that I needed to do emotionally, as opposed to a physical change. And I think there's a lot of people out there that would benefit from that knowledge. Krystal, where do we find you? How do we get a hold of you? How do the people who listen to this seek you out?
I am all over online. You can certainly find me on social media and on my website. If you know that you're interested in working with me, you can work with me at peaceandprosperityalignment.com. You can book a consultation call. And I do have a free download that is probably the best place for people to get started with their own clutter. I mentioned the Declutter Your Mindset method. That is my method for decluttering your space. And it's a 5-step method simply called Declutter Your Mindset. And you can download it at declutteryourmindset.com.
I like it. No, I hate simplicity. I like simplicity. That's great. So this is literally what it's called, and it's where it's at.
So yes, you can download that, and it will get you started with the decluttering process and what those steps are to be able to dig into the mental and emotional part of the physical clutter.
Krystal, you have been an absolute joy, and I want to thank you so much for doing this for me. I wish you nothing but the greatest level of success moving forward. I look forward to seeing you on many platforms. Yeah, well, no, don't destroy your house over it. No, it's not that bad. But thank you so much.
Thank you. It was a pleasure to be here, Earl.
You've been listening to the Edited for Content podcast. Again, if you enjoyed it, let me know, share it, and come back again. Thanks for listening, my friend. Have a great day.